Hi there, this is just a quick look at the 15 mark source question for advanced hire. The question itself has 15 marks available. Remember that there are 5 marks for each question, so there'll be question A, question B, and question C. And with that, question A is going to deal with your knowledge and understanding. So it's pretty much going to ask you to describe something. Question B is going to ask you a little bit of analysis, and question C is going to ask you to evaluate. Remember that as you go through each of these, just as you can see on the conveyor belt here, on knowledge, analysis, and evaluation, you really want to treat the three as 3 separate things. And I know that that's quite tricky, especially when it comes to the analysis and evaluation, because you'll need some knowledge in there as well, just to try and make your point. But remember that the marks that you're going to pick up, you're not going to get marks for repetition throughout, and your marks are pretty much for analysis and evaluation going to be for the skills, and we'll talk about that as we go through it. So first off, let's look at the knowledge. So the knowledge that the things that you want to be talking about here are descriptors. So it's really the recall and remembering of like your facts, your key relevant information, the stuff that you've looked at in your notes. It's a simple explanation of the things contained within or associated with the quote or the statement, or what it's going to ask you in the question. So remember, recall key information, facts, and things from your notes. When you move along to the analysis then, I like to start off with the 3 C's. So for me, that's looking at any connections. What can you connect this to, this quote? Look at any comparisons as well, so similarities or differences, and consequences as well. Those consequences, implications. Because of this, the implication will be this raises a consequence of this will be. Also, a good way to do that is to bring in related quotes or examples or stories. The quotes, the examples, or the stories themselves are knowledge, but what you can do is you bring them in and use them with the connections, comparisons, and consequences. It really gives you, I suppose, a nice foundation, those quotes or examples or stories, to build your analysis on. So you might want to bring in what someone else thinks about it. So say, for example, the question that we're going to look at is a quote from Richard Dawkins, but you might then want to say, similar to Dawkins' position on this, Bertrand Russell will also say, or there are differences with what Dawkins is saying and the position that Alistair McGrath might take on this. And what you're doing there is you're being quite deeply analytical with the quote, which is great. And then we'll move on to evaluation. So this is your reasoned judgment on the quote or statement. Remember, it's absolutely fine to say I believe a strength of this is, I believe there are weaknesses in this argument. I agree with whoever it is that you're agreeing with or disagreeing with. And you can use counter arguments here as well. But remember, what you're doing with the counter arguments is that you're not comparing them, you're judging them. And that's the main difference there between the analysis and the evaluation. It's making a reasoned judgment. So if we look at an example, this was from the specimen question paper last year. There is something infantile in the presumption that somebody else has a responsibility to give your life meaning and point. Our life is as meaningful, as full, and as wonderful as we make it. That's from Richard Dawkins. So there's 3 things here, A, B, and C, and they're all worth 5 marks. And they line up with what we were talking about, which is knowledge and understanding, and that's our describe question A, and then the analysis, and then the evaluation. So describe what is meant by the presumption of atheism. And remember what was said here, remembering the key facts, the key relevant information, those things that you've learned, and recalling those. So you might want to talk about the burden of proof. You might want to talk a little bit here. You could bring in something about agnosticism. You could talk about positive or strong atheism and describe what it is. You could describe what weak or negative atheism is here as well. And remember, you're going to want to make 5 points. Okay, you're going to want to make 5 points. You're going to get a mark per each developed point. And that's not to say if you start to talk about agnosticism and you develop it a little bit, you might make 1 or 2 developed points about agnosticism. That's one way that you could approach that. The analysis, again, remember that for analysis, in question B here, what you might want to do is you might want to start to talk a little bit about the Anthony flu and the presumption of atheism. So there is something infantile in the presumption that somebody else has a responsibility to give your life meaning and point. So you can start to talk and maybe compare what Richard Dawkins is saying here to Anthony Flew, or talk a little bit about Bertrand Russell's Celestial Teapot and compare them, and draw a connection there. So there is a connection between what Dawkins says and what somebody else says, or there's a comparison here, and pick out similarities and differences. If you use that word comparison, talk about similarities, talk about differences. Again, going on to evaluation. An evaluation is your reasoned judgment on this. Okay, so again, what we said before is that I agree with, I disagree with Dawkins because one strength of Dawkins' claim would be, however, I think that a weakness with what Dawkins is saying is, and then, as I say, bringing in those counter arguments as judgments as well. The counter argument to the fact that, maybe in this instance, somebody talking about God giving meaning, and you could bring that in as a counter argument and make a judgment on it. Okay, and that's going to pick up your marks. But that's basically how to go about this in a very sort of straightforward and logical way. Remember, there are 3 sections. You're not going to get marks for your repetition. You will have to set your analysis and evaluation up with something. As I say, examples or quotes or stories is a great way to do that. But hopefully that'll be some help as you try and navigate through this.